What's going on, everybody? This is the Wisdom Matrix, and this video is about analysis versus systems. Sorry, didn't mean to say that. Analysis versus synthesis thinking. What is analysis? Basically, analysis is when you look at something and you look at its component parts or something like that. You analyze a math problem, or you analyze, a bug or an animal or something. Basically, an analysis is where you take something and you take one thing and you just look at that one thing and you try and deconstruct it into its original parts in some ways, with your observations or whatever. Then synthesis thinking is where you take what you've learned from your analysis and then you put it all together. So synthesis thinking is an essential component to growth, to learning, in a lot of ways, because a lot of problems end up happening because of either too much analysis or too much knowledge, or not enough contemplation, synthesis thinking, or awareness, or awareness of how the mind works, or any of these things. And why this is important is because the mind likes to analyze things, but it doesn't like to put them. Well, it does like to put them together, like, sometimes, but it has, I don't know, it depends on the person, I suppose, but the problem is that too much analysis, too much knowledge actually leads to confusion, because there's not enough wisdom there to understand that knowledge. If you want to know what I'm talking about, you can see my video, What is Wisdom? Understanding what wisdom is and how to find it, more of it in your everyday life or something like that. Basically, in that video, I talked about how too much knowledge can be a bad thing, can be a problem, which is actually what we're dealing with right now in this society. We have a lot of too much information at our hands that we can just look up without understanding it or looking at it. I'm not saying that you have to understand everything, but in order to not be confused or whatever. But if you do want to learn something, especially something like the mind, something really like abstract and complicated, you can't just analyze the mind, into its component parts. You have to put it all together, figure out why it does what it does, what are the causes here. This is what systems thinking does. This is what most science kind of does in a lot of ways. But you see, the problem that happens here too is, like I said, this is caused by too much knowledge, too much thinking, actually, in some ways, and not enough awareness or understanding of the mind's, how the mind does things. And the reason why this is important to understand to some extent is because if you don't have wisdom, or if you don't have, a grasp of this thing, it's going to rule your life. It already does rule your life for the most part, unless you can see it and you can kind of deal with it. But most people can't see it and can't deal with it because they're focused on other things, and they get lost in the data. Knowledge is great, but too much knowledge, which is the norm these days, is where we have this problem of not enough awareness, not enough wisdom, not enough love, not enough compassion. Not that there's not enough of these things, but they don't see it in themselves. They don't see the bigger picture of how these things fit together, or what these things mean, or anything like that. And so they lose a vital part of themselves because they're stuck in the data. And so this is what synthesis thinking does. You try and make a bigger picture out of everything. You go, well, why is this here? What does this mean? If what are all these analyses that I'm doing here for? Why am I analyzing? Like I said, if you don't understand the mind as well, you're gonna get lost. You're gonna get confused and all these different things. But when it comes to other things besides the mind, with synthesis thinking, you have to put it all together. Well, what are these analyses have in common? What do they mean? What are their causes? Maybe there's other things in here. What are the causes of this? What do they have in common with this? Or whatever. What are the ramifications of this type things? This is what systems thinking kind of does in some ways. But like I said, too much of that even can be a problem because you have confusion. Believe it or not, it sounds contradictory, but too much knowledge and too much of that, too much thinking, actually leads to confusion, and actually leads to you getting lost within data. You can almost think of it as you can think of the data or the analysis or whatever is as water, and you're just drowning in the water. So this is why awareness is important. This is why not taking things too seriously is important, because if you do, you're gonna be stuck within these things. You're gonna get too serious, and you're gonna be confused and lost. Wouldn't know what to do. So, and for more information on that, you can watch my video, "The Curse of Taking Things Too Seriously." It goes over the problems with taking things seriously and how to kind of deal with it. But basically, to deal with it, you just have to, stop thinking for a while. Focus on the present moment. Like a light focus or whatever. You just try not to take things too seriously, because that's what keeps the ego. That's what keeps the ego stronger. Seriousness is what the ego kind of strives on, because seriousness involves a little bit of fear and anxiety and desire to some extent. You take things seriously because you desire something to be a certain way as well. So it works on the two modes of ego. So it all kind of fits together. This is what synthesis thinking does. It takes all these different ideas that I've talked about here. The two modes of ego. You can see that video that I made. The two levels of ego, or whatever it was. Two modes of ego. Basically, the ego or the mind has two different levels or modes that it works on: desire and fear, and they kind of feed off of each other. So say you have a fear of I don't know, not knowing something, and say you desire to know something, and so you do all these things. So that desire creates other desires, which creates fears of, failing or becoming incompetent and knowing these things or whatever. And so they kind of feed off of each other. And this is what happens when you take things seriously. If you take it seriously, these desires and fears are going to control your life. So anyways, this is the Wisdom Matrix. If you like this video, please like it and share it and subscribe. So that other people can get the same benefits as you did if you got some kind of benefit from it. This is the Wisdom Matrix, and I'll see you in the next video.